Welcome back to World Studies. In case you forgot what class you are in, I know many of you guys have been out now. The flu epidemic has kept us from operating school, but we're trying this online method. Hopefully it'll be able to work out well. I'm just praying that this will not become the norm for us. I'm seeing already that it's pretty efficient to teach, but having no interaction from the students can also be a little difficult as well. But 7th graders, don't forget, please, that there was a homework assignment, page 129 and 130, as well as a quiz that was assigned before we took this break. Please make sure the quiz is in your packet. The homework is in your activities book that you all took home. So that is supposed to be turned in with the other information, the other things that were handed out to you this first week. In your notes, remember we're doing chapter 16. We have already covered Roman numerals 1, which had to do with the Ottoman Empire, and Roman numeral 2, which had to do with Russia at the turn of the 20th century. So now, Roman numeral 3, we're going to talk about the domination of India by Britain. Britain came to India initially to trade. And as the Mughal Empire, remember the last Mongol empire of Asia, declined in India, Britain will gain greater control over the region and defeat any European rival seeking to do the same. Letter A, advance of British power. The East India Company developed extensive trade relations in India. Over time, the British government will take control. Number 1, conflict with France. The conflict was known as the 7 Years' War. That's what it was named internationally. It was a war fought between Britain and France. This war also took place in Europe and in America. In America, it went by a different name. It was known as the French and Indian War. This war in India was decided by one key battle, the Battle of Plassey. At Plassey, the British had 3,000 men against a disorganized Indian force of around 80,000 men. In 1757, at the Battle of Plassey, British commander Robert Clive defeated a French-supported Indian force. This battle broke France's strength in India, and within 3 years, the war was over. So make sure you know the name of the war, the 7 Years' War. Make sure you remember the key battle, Battle of Plassey. Make sure you remember the key individual and the result of the battle. Robert Clive defeated the French. Letter B, conquest of India. The British government began to exert greater control over the East India Company in the late 1700s. And as the government became more involved, they began to realize the importance of stabilizing India to enhance British trade. In 1814, the Charter Act gave the British Crown control over all that the company possessed. If it hadn't been official before, it was official now that the government controlled the company. The final incident that led to the British government taking complete control occurred when the Indian soldiers revolted. Sepoys. This is the name to describe Indian soldiers who served under British rule. Obviously, Britain couldn't govern all of India on its own. We're talking about a country of tens of millions of people trying to rule over another region consisting of hundreds of millions. Yeah, that wouldn't have worked. So the British had gotten Indian soldiers to serve for them. This worked out quite well until the mid-1800s. In 1857-1858, an event known as the Sepoy Mutiny took place. The reason? A rumor concerning gun cartridges. The newly issued rifle used a gun cartridge that was greased in pork or beef fat. The purpose of that was to help make it waterproof. In order to use the cartridges, the soldiers had to open them, usually by biting them. If you can visually imagine, you're holding the gun in one hand, you're holding the cartridge in the other hand. There's no way to tear open the cartridge because you're holding the gun, and so the only way to do it is to use your teeth and to rip it open. Well, the problem was the pork or beef fat. See, Hindu soldiers were offended because the cow was sacred to them. Muslim soldiers were offended because they considered pork unclean. When these soldiers were ordered to obey, they refused, and before the British could restore order, fighting erupted. The fighting did eventually end within the year, and India was absorbed completely into the British Empire. Now make sure you understand at this time period, it's more than just the country of India that was absorbed. Pakistan, modern-day Bangladesh, and Burma, Sri Lanka, all of this would technically have been part of India during this time. So all of this was absorbed into the British Empire. If you look at page 291, it talks about the consequences of British rule. We understand consequences. We've talked about consequences a lot in other periods in history. Sometimes there are good consequences, and sometimes there are bad consequences. What I want you guys to do now on page 291 is to read the purple box to yourself. You'll pause the video here. Once you have finished reading the box, please unpause and continue on with this lesson. Welcome back. On page 292, it shows you a map of British India as of 1860. Some of it shows us what territories were taken over by the British. That's in the green. Those that are in the orangish colors are territories that for a while were ruled by local princes, local rulers, that eventually will all fall under the control of the British. Letter B. Patterns of British trade with India and China. British merchants established extensive trade with India and with China. We'll talk in greater detail about China next chapter, or next section of notes. The British produced cotton and traded it to China for goods. These goods included rhubarb, tea, and silk. However, these goods were more valuable, and British merchants were forced to pay the difference in silk, resulting in a negative balance of trade. So, the British also began producing the addicting opium drug for the Chinese. Soon, unfortunately, the Chinese demand for the addicting and destructive substance reversed the balance of trade. Now, silver flowed from China to Britain. Tomorrow, we will go into greater details and talk about the results of this trade deal going on between the British and China. For homework, I want you to turn to your activities books to page 131. 131 is a reading section about the Sepoy Mutiny. It goes in greater detail. Please read the paragraphs. There are 3 questions on page 131, and then there are 3 more questions found on page 132. That'll be your homework for tonight. Remember, guys, if you are missing your notes for some reason, my best suggestion for you right now is to handwrite the notes that you see on the projector. You can handle that. If you need to pause the video at any time, you can easily do that, and you'll be good to go. Hope you have a good rest of the day. Be good, do good. Goodbye.